Kayla, and I've had some wine. Oh, my face is so red. So today I'm going to attempt to do my August wrap-up. So let's do this. I have to pull up Goodreads because I don't remember what I read. And you guys haven't, like, it's like I just read these books. I don't remember what they were. Okay, so in my last wrap-up video, I talked about Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, the webcomic series that is put into a book. I actually read that in August. I read it on the plane coming home for my Tynion reunion. So, but to dabble just a little bit on that again because it's so good. It's a horror comic bind up. They're not related, they're just all kind of horror themed. And the artwork is amazing. The lettering is amazing. And it feels just like childhood scary stories, but new with a twist, like ones that I haven't heard before. She has others on her website, and what I like is that the whole screen goes black and you see the artwork and you click, 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 and you go through like the comic, and on the very last panel it's a scroll down, so you scroll down to like the final image at the bottom, and so it's kind of like interactive in a way. It's fun. You should try it. Emily Carroll. I'll link it below. Okay, so the next thing I read was the only novel I read this month, the rest were comics, again, was The Cabin at the End of the World. Wait, The Cabin at the Edge of the World? Cabin at the End of the World by Paula Tremblay. This was really good. I only gave it 4 stars, but it's like 5-star worthy. The only reason I docked a star mainly was because of the ending. Like, I'm that kind of person that's like, if it has like a really good ending, I'm like, oh yeah, 5 stars, woohoo! But then later I'm like, it's probably like a 4-star. But if it's a shitty ending, or like a meh ending, not even shitty ending. Like, this book didn't have a shitty ending, it just had like a meh ending. I was like, 4 stars. But it's like 5-star worthy. And I went into this book knowing nothing, so I kind of don't want to tell you guys what it's about. I'm just gonna give you one word: apocalyptic. You should read it. I really think it's like the kind of horror that anyone could like. It's not just like your typical horror that only a horror person would like. It's like likable by many, I think. Give it a try. Okay, so moving on with the comics, I read Peanuts Volume 1 by Charles M. Schultz and other people because RIP. This was fun. So this had a mix of old original like comic strip comics mixed with like new stories and artwork. I'm assuming they're new stories, and the artwork is not new and modern enough that like the characters look super different, but it's mainly in like the paneling and like the use of layouts that is really refreshing. And then the best part, like the funniest part, like the funniest comics in this trade were there's a couple of like how to draw Charlie Brown, like how to draw so-and-so, and so like one of the characters was like walking you through step by step on how to draw one of the other characters, and like it was like legit, like do the little frame, like legit how to draw this person, but like they were throwing shade at this person the whole time. Like it was just hilarious. Like Lucy did a how to draw Charlie Brown and she was just like throwing Charlie Brown under the bus, and then Linus was doing a how to draw Lucy and he was just like ragging on his sister, and then she like comes in towards the end, and it's just, it was so funny. So yeah, 4 stars. It was really great. Everything wasn't completely funny just because sometimes there's ones that are like meh, but still really good. If you're a Peanuts fan, definitely check it out. Next, I read Stephen McCranie's Space Boy Volume 1. This guy has his name in the title of the book. I read this for Panels Book Club from July. Like, I was a little bit late. This was so good. This was so like I just kind of thought this was gonna be just a cutesy contemporary but with a sci-fi twist, and in a way it was, but it had different layers. Like, it just has a lot of substance to it. In this first volume, it's a lot of just setup. So Space Boy is about this girl who lives out in this like space station thing, and her family is like mining stuff, and her dad loses his job, and so they have to go back to Earth, and they get frozen to make like the 30-year trek to Earth, and then she gets to like start her life again, but she's like, I don't know, 15. And so basically the bulk of the story, at least right now, is her adjusting to, one, living on Earth, and two, living on Earth 30 years in the future on a different planet. Brief intermission. Okay, so getting back to Space Boy. The cool thing about it is that it dives into the whole social media, electronics, interaction thing. Like, are you really interacting with people even though you're staring at a device versus actually like interacting with people or the world around you? It has a great dialogue about that without being too preachy, and it's very subtle, but I think it still has a big impact. It was just a whole lot more than I thought it was. Like, very impressive. Definitely check it out if you're into comics or you're wanting to get into comics. It's very subtle and easy to read, but has great substance, and the artwork is fantastic. Next, I read Watchmen, the complete thing, by Alan Moore, and illustrated by Dave Gibbons and colored by John Higgins. Okay, so I watched the movie a long time ago. Don't remember it at all. Like, didn't remember it at all. Read Watchmen. Like, I didn't remember anything. It was so great. I totally understand why it's a staple and a classic in the comic book world, even outside of superhero genre. Like, I normally don't read in the superhero genre with comics, but I feel like Watchmen kind of transcends the genres, if you will, but it's still kind of very true to the comic book formula, but kind of has a twist on it. I gave it 4 stars only because it was very heavy, which I liked, but for a comic, it was very, it was slow to get through. And my main things that I didn't like about it, and that aren't in the movie, are, 1, they have a comic within a comic, which I like the idea. That's very, what's his face? Woody Allen of this comic. There's this kid at the newspaper stand that's reading this comic book, and what's happening in the comic book kind of mirrors what is happening in the city and what is happening to the superheroes, but not really. And there's definitely tons of panels and tons of dialogue that could have been just edited out or changed or something. Like, it was just getting to the point where I would skim parts of it because it wasn't adding anything to the story. It was just a cool idea, and I think if it would have been done a little bit less, it would have been more successful, in my opinion. I just thought it was a little bit overdone. And then after each issue or chapter, they have a mixed media thing that kind of adds a little bit of backstory and extra information to any of the characters within the series. Like, it's a newspaper article, it's like an encyclopedia or some kind of like book chapters, or just different mixed media things. I love that. So cool. But kind of along the vein with the comics, within the comic, it didn't add that much. It was a cool idea. It gave us a little bit of insight, like a little bit, but they were so long that it could have either had more information in it, especially since now they came out with like before the Watchmen comics now. They could have added in more information or scaled it down a lot. Because again, it was getting to the point where I was like skimming through chunks of it because there was no point in reading it. Those are my only critiques. It might sound, I don't know, the parts really had no influence in the main story. The main story was great, loved it, took some turns I did not expect it to take. The ending is very different than the movie. If you've only seen the movie, I suggest trying the comics out. Why not? They are good. In my opinion, I just thought some things weren't as successful as they could have been. And Watchmen, in case you don't know, like the storyline, is just like, it talks about like these two different generations of superheroes, and eventually it gets to the point where it's kind of like The Incredibles, where their secret identity needs to become their real identity. I love that quote from Incredibles. But that's kind of it. Like, it's kind of like a grown-up, different version of Incredibles, where like these supers can't be supers anymore, and what kind of happens to the city, and what do these supers are like, what are they doing with their lives, and some of them start dying and they're trying to figure out what the hell is happening. Like, okay, and then I read Fables Volume 1 and Fables Volume 2 by Bill Willingham and illustrated by Lan Medina and Steve Lealoa and other people, I guess. This is another older comic series. This one is more in the 90s versus the 80s with Watchmen. I've never heard of this. I picked this up because it essentially is like a fairy tale retelling. And I picked it up for Retell-a-thon a long time ago, and I never read them then. But I read them now. Volume 1 is really good. It's kind of like a twist of like Once Upon a Time from ABC, where it was like you have these fairy tale creatures and people, and they're taken out of their world and dumped into New York City, and they're living their lives in the city, and some of them live on the farm. That's Volume 2, like the animals live on the farm. Volume 1, the humans live in the city, and some of them have money and they can pay lots of money to glamour themselves to look like humans when they're really not. And some of them don't have monies, and there's like this underground like society, there's like a governor, and there's all these things. And basically in Volume 1, it's nice because Volume 1 just has its own story arc. Volume 1 has like this like murder mystery element, or one of the fairy tale creatures is murdered and they're trying to figure out who did it. Volume 2 is we go to the farm and we figure out what life is like on the farm, and there's kind of a coup going on. The farm fairy tales, the farm fables, they're called fables I think, don't like it on the farm. They feel left out and exiled, and yeah, it's kind of its own, again, it's like its own story arc, but you can kind of tell like it's pushing towards an overall series arc. There's tons of volumes, and then there's like spin-offs, like it's this huge thing. I've never heard of it before, but Fables is a thing in the comic book world. I read it, physical copies, and like it has like the old style low stock grade paper, not coated, but full color. Very cool to look at, very great artwork. Yeah, it was really good. If you like retellings, if you kind of like Once Upon a Time, it's not exactly like Once Upon a Time, but I feel like it kind of inspired Once Upon a Time, in my opinion. Okay, and my last read for August was the Backstagers Volume 1. Oh, it's so good. By James Tynion IV and illustrated by Ryan Sieg. Okay, so first off, along with a lot of comics, the cover art is not the same artwork as what is on the inside. The cover art is very pretty. What's inside is very pretty, but it's very modern. It looks like 95% of the cartoons that are on Cartoon Network nowadays. Like, it has that kind of feel. And it also kind of gives me like Sailor Moon vibes, like with the expressions, like the manga expressions where it's like there's like extreme happiness or extreme anger, and they have like those silly faces, and it goes there. It's so fun. The Backstagers are the backstage crew for this high school theater department, and you know, they run the shows, but there's this like weird secret that is in the backstage, is that like there's this different world backstage. Like, you go back there and there's like these endless rooms, this endless, I don't know the word, maze, labyrinth backstage that is very magical. There's different creatures, there's lots of different things that happen back there, and it's just this sweet but still kind of magical, kind of feels like magical realism a little bit, essence to it, and I love it so much. The characters are really cool. The characters, though, they remind me so much of Ouran High School Host Club. I only saw the manga, or the anime, I saw in a few episodes, but like, there's the cute little, youthful, I don't know the term, there's a certain term for it. There's like the youth, like the little one that looks like a little kid, but he's really like 16 or 17. There's that character. And then there's the macho looking male who is very just like, oh, kawaii, like very like crushing on the main character. And the main character is very like kind of quiet but cute and reserved. And then there's like the two twins that have this weird like romantic thing going on between each other. I don't know how else to say it. Like, there's nothing happens, but like there's this weird, like, they're very intimate and close, and too close for siblings, let alone twins. You know what I'm saying? Loud and overdone. Like, each character has its own voice. They shine. They're doing their own thing. And there's kind of this underlying plot still, because I like plot. I'm not just a character person. It was so sweet. 5 stars. I loved it so much. That's the kind of like sweet thing I like, versus just being daily mundane things. Like, there's still like, there's a show that has to be put on, and they're doing things, and the weird shit is happening backstage. It was just fun. I just loved it. I recommend checking it out, just like everything. I liked everything I read this month. I had a great month. Okay, so those are all the things I read in August. Lots of comics, 1 book. I recommend them all. Check them out on Goodreads. Do whatever you want to do. Live your life. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.